Right, welcome everybody to the webinar. Just start as soon as it turns to 2 o'clock.
Can I make the important announcement
Okay.
that I just mentioned?
Oh,
Argentina is now winning 3-2, and Messi scored that goal. So if anybody in the chat cares about that and they can't go watch it like we can't, my husband is texting me the score, so you can have that important information. Sorry that we scheduled this during the World Cup.
all right, it's 2 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. If you're having technical difficulties or you have kind of other issues, you can use the chat function. However, if you have questions for this webinar, please use the Q&A box. Depending on your screen size, it might show up on your top bar as Q&A with little bubbles with a question mark in it. If not, click on the More button with the 3 dots, and it should be in there somewhere. But we ask that you submit your webinar questions through the Q&A box. It helps us collect them and respond to them in a more orderly fashion. All right, so thank you all for joining us for the NIH Director's Transformative Research Award webinar. This is for RFA RM-27-003. Your panelists today will be Dr. Trish Lebowski and me, Becky Miller. We're both from the Office of Strategic Coordination. That's within the Office of the Director at NIH. We'd like to point you to some resources that we have readily available to you on our website. If you go to commonfund.nih.gov/TRA, you can view an application guide that includes some old sample applications. It also has a frequently asked questions page. You can go, and I'm certain a lot of the questions you have for us today are probably found in this FAQ page. And we also we'll have the webinar that will be posted onto the website as well. So we ask you to go there. You'll find a lot of great information. However, if we do not get to your question today or you have additional questions, please contact us at transformative_awards@mail.nih.gov, and we will be able to respond to you there. And we ask that when you do submit questions for this webinar, that you please do not include any very highly specific information about your proposal or anything that might just be just only of interest to you, like it's such a specific question. That would probably be better answered through our email. All right, so let's get started. To begin, I just want to give you a little information about the NIH Common Fund. So that's our office manages the Common Fund, and the Common Fund puts together programs such as the High Risk, High Reward Research Program. But the Common Fund, has this mission to support bold scientific programs that catalyze discovery across all biomedical and behavioral research. So anything of relevance to the NIH mission. We bring together investigators and multiple NIH institutes and centers and offices to collaborate together on innovative research to address high priority challenges for the NIH as a whole and to make a broader impact in the scientific community. So in order for an idea to become a Common Fund program, it must meet these 5 different criteria, which includes being synergistic, a transformative idea, novel, catalytic, and goal-driven. We have numerous programs that are up and running at this moment. I think we have around 25-ish, but we always have new programs coming out and kind of older ones sunsetting. So we really encourage you to go to our website at commonfund.nih.gov to look at the current programs and see if there are other funding opportunities that might be of interest to you. But importantly, a lot of our programs really generate resources, they generate data, we even have developed infrastructure, so things that are useful to the scientific community. They're also available to you and accessible, so check out our website, see if there are some resources that will help you out in your scientific endeavors. But today we are here to talk about one specific program, that's the High Risk, High Reward Research Program. It's composed of 4 different NIH Directors Awards. That includes the Pioneer Award, the New Innovator Award, the Transformative Research Award, and the Early Independence Award. So these 4 awards support scientists at all different career stages who are proposing outstanding high-risk, high-impact research. We aim to issue annual funding opportunities when we're able to, and we welcome all your high-risk, high-impact ideas. So one thing that's very unique about our program is that for these 4 awards, we do not require preliminary data or a detailed experimental plan. And when we say that, we are sincere that you do not have to include preliminary data. So that's a really important, unique feature of this program. And we will discuss that more in relation to the Transformative Research Award as we go through this webinar. We also welcome any topic relevant to the NIH mission. So it can be behavioral or social science, be it biomedical, applied, or more of a formal science. It can be basic, translational, or clinical research. We really do welcome anything that is relevant to the NIH mission. In fact, we have a working group of NIH staff from all the NIH institutes and centers who help us run this program. So we do have representation from the various areas of science supported by NIH. And just to let you know that we are sincere when we say we welcome any topic that is of relevance to the NIH mission. And we also encourage applications from the full spectrum of eligible institutions. So please, if you're in industry and you're eligible for NIH funding, you're welcome to apply. If you come from maybe a less research intensive institution, still welcome to apply. So we do welcome the full spectrum. And with that, I am going to turn this over to Trish, where she is going to walk us through the award in more detail.
The other important announcement, I'm sorry, Becky, is that the game is over. Argentina had an epic comeback and beat Egypt in the World Cup game just now. So if anybody was worried that they missed it because they're here learning about this important program, now you know. Okay. So welcome. Thanks for tuning in. I am the program officer for the Transformative Research Award applications. So again, this is part of our high-risk, high-reward research program that Becky already introduced quite well. And it's one of 4, right? So this award is designed to support exceptionally innovative or perhaps unconventional research projects with the potential to create or overturn fundamental paradigms. The program or the award started in 2009, so it's been around a while. Unique to this award is that it's open to both individuals or teams at any career stage. You're not limited. Again, as Becky mentioned, no preliminary data are required. The budget is flexible. We can get into that more later. And like any of our awards, it cannot be renewed. So it is an R01 application, but it's used differently than what you're used to. It's used in an unconventional way. So here on the slide is a little bit of a grid to kind of show you the difference between this Transformative Research Award and your more standard R01 application. The specific aims page, it is not to be used to list specific objectives of your project as you would for a standard R01 application. Instead, you should use it as a 1-page distillation of the project and why it's well aligned with the spirit of the TRA initiative. There's 2 sections. We give you the headings. The first is significance, innovation, impact. And then the second is insight and rationale. And this will become very important when I talk about the review process in a couple slides. So keep that in mind. It's not your standard specific aims page. If you submit it that way, you're doing yourself a disservice. So the research strategy section is also different. Again, it's not used as in a standard R01 application with substantial preliminary data and a lot of experimental details. Instead, you're to use this section to address items of programmatic importance to the TRA. There are 5 sections, and you should use these headings and the sections in this order. You can add additional subheadings if you want, but these have to be there. First, overview of the research project. This should set the context for the entire project. Next, number 2 is approach. So you're going to describe the underlying logic, and again, your logic and the approach has to ensure the robustness and rigor, reproducibility of the project that you're designing. The third heading is innovation. Explain why this is exceptionally innovative. Don't leave it up to the reviewers to make that conclusion. Tell them why. That they are quite capable of making up their own minds if they decide they don't believe you, but tell them why it's innovative. Number 4 is appropriateness for the TRA. So explain why this project is high risk, high reward, HRHR, and not appropriate for a traditional R01. And if you think the only reason for that is because you don't have preliminary data, I'll tell you right now, that's not a good enough reason. You need it to be truly creative, truly unconventional, and exceptionally innovative. And then the final heading is the timeline. So include a timeline. And in that timeline, you should include critical decision points, perhaps go, no go time points. And this will also give the reviewers a clear idea that your plan is well thought through and you can accomplish this in 5 years. So when you're thinking about your research strategy, this is what the consideration should be. I'll describe the review in a little bit more detail in a minute, but given that not all the reviewers will be topic experts, be sure that what you're writing can be easily appreciated by people well outside your scientific field for exceptional innovation and the potential for unusually broad impact. So we would suggest that you might begin with a description of the landscape of the field and the current state of the art or boundaries in the field, challenges, things that are in the way of progress. Provide the proper context for your project, for the proposal, and why it is so innovative and potentially impactful. Ease the reader into the jargon of the field. Do not submit, like you would for an R01, something that's very heavy with field-specific jargon. That will not review very well. Though no detailed experimental plan is required, make it clear exactly what it is you're going to want to do. So you don't have to include details like, I don't know, antibody lots and times of incubation, things like that, that might alleviate the reviewer's concern about risk. But they do need to know that you have a plan, what the plan is, what the alternatives are, etc. Okay? Convince those reviewers that you've thought deeply about this project. So identify the risky aspects. You tell them what's risky, right? And then how you will mitigate this risk, your alternative approaches, what you might have to give up if you have to take an alternative approach and you can't use your plan A, right? Then finally, you also want to convince reviewers that the research will be performed in a robust and rigorous manner. You'll want to validate new approaches. You should provide statistically driven estimates of numbers for human subjects or animal subjects if you're using them, and why. You don't have to include all the details of a power analysis, but you'll want to inform them, what was the power analysis that was done and how many mice do you need for this. Include that sex is considered as a biological variable if that's appropriate for your project. So things like this that will convince reviewers you've thought about it deeply and that you will perform the project in a rigorous manner. So this is the review process. This is very different than what you're used to with the traditional R01. So it's divided up. The one thing that's the same is it's divided into two levels of review. The first level of review driven by CSR, the NIH Center for Scientific Review, and that's what's very different. The second level of review is council approval. You don't really need to worry about that. That's something that we take care of here internal to NIH. So let's focus on the first level of review. This is divided up into 3 phases, and they're very different, right, than traditional. So first of all, the applications will be received, and I believe they are due on September 3rd. So do not submit late. This is an RFA. Nobody has permission to submit late anymore, unless there's a natural disaster or something like that. But don't submit late. Submit a day or so early just in case. So September 3rd. So all the applications come into CSR where they're looked at for compliance, and then they're sent out first to phase 1 editorial panel. There's a select subset that will be selected here using only the specific aims page. So the editorial panel, which is a broad group of reviewers, will see they have the whole application, but they're really only going to focus on your aims page, and they will review them according to the simplified review format criteria, but they will, with an overlying desire to determine whether or not this is transformative. So it's kind of an up or down vote at this point. A select subset will move forward into phase 2. I can't tell you exactly what the percent is that progress from phase 1 or to phase 2. It depends on the number of applications we receive because we're looking at a specific round number. But in years past, it's been a 50% cut at this stage. So phase 2, the applications that have moved forward will move out to what we call topic experts, 3 of them. So these people should have subject matter expertise. Again, they're identified by the Center for Scientific Review review officer. These experts will review the application, the whole application, and provide their critiques. They will give number scores and critiques. At that point, all of the applications progress to phase 3, and the editorial panel will make additional cuts. They will review the application and the comments and scores from the phase 2 topic expert reviewers, select a subset, discuss, and score the final grants applications. So it's blown up a little bit more on the next slide. Again, phase 1. Here is the due date again, September 3rd. And this is the first part that takes place fairly quickly. It's in the fall, September to November. Phase 1 review, September to November 2026. So the editorial board review panel is composed of 16 to 20 senior level scientists with collective expertise spanning from diverse scientific areas that broadly cover the NIH research portfolio. So almost every area of science will be represented by these individuals. Each at phase 1, each application will be reviewed by 4 members of the editorial panel. Each editor reviews the specific aims page of many, okay, so 40 to 50 applications, and bins them based on potential transformative impact. So they use the simplified review format with this overlying transformative impact being the most important score driver. So the top scoring subset of those applications, plus any rescues if the committee deems it appropriate, will then advance to phase 2. So that phase 2, as I mentioned before on the next slide, is the topic expert review. There, again, are topic experts, three of them, that review the applications. They provide preliminary comments, they give scores and critiques. This happens obviously after phase one. It goes from around December 2026 to February 2027. We have a round number that we're shooting for, that between 70 and 80 applications will be reviewed in this manner. The rest of them, as I mentioned, were cut at phase one. So the top 70 or 80 applications selected from phase one are reviewed by these so-called MAIL, M-A-I-L, MAIL reviewers, who are topic experts in the area of science of the application. Each application is reviewed by three topic experts, and then these mail-in reviewers provide written comments addressing significance and transformative impact, the level of innovation for the project, and the logic of the approach. Again, the simplified review format factors are used. It's an R01. Finally, phase three, the editorial panel review. They review the application and comments from phase two and the numbers. There are numbers from phase two as well. They select a subset and discuss them all and score them. The application selection happens between February and March. This year will be 2027, and the review meeting will happen either very late March 2027 or maybe early April. We don't have a date yet. So each panel member, the editorial panel members, are assigned, again, 15 to 20 applications to review. They have access to the phase two topic expert preliminary scores and comments. The panel will select approximately 50% of the phase two applications to discuss. So if it was 70, 80 before, it's 35 to 40 that are discussed. The panel discusses this subset and scores them in their final face-to-face or Zoom review meeting. So one last thing I wanted to say about that review cycle is that a couple years ago, we used to do this in an anonymized fashion. We do not do that anymore, so you don't need to worry about anonymizing your applications. But importantly, that is a special emphasis panel where everything is reviewed together, if that wasn't clear from what I stated. You don't need to request a study section. It goes to the Transformative Award study section. Okay, so again, as Becky mentioned, please check out our website, commonfund.nih.gov/TRA. And if you have additional questions after this webinar and after reading through the guidance there's a lot of information there. Really, I promise you that your question, probably 99% of them are answered there. But if not, then you can email at transformative_awards@mail.nih.gov, and I handle that mailbox, and I'll get to your questions quickly and answer them. A recording of this webinar and the slides will be posted on the website in approximately a week. I can't promise exactly what day it'll be posted, but around a week from now. So I think we're open to questions now, and I think Becky is going to pepper me with questions, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, first question. How does the TRA review process practically differ from a standard R01 review, given that the TRA emphasizes transformative potential over standard predictable milestones?
So the review process, maybe go back a couple slides, Becky, to that one that shows the whole thing. Yeah, slide 12. So if you look at that, this is a very different review process than a standard R01 process where there's no phase one or phase two or phase three. There's simply the review where the applications will be given to three reviewers, and those three reviewers will review them. They still review them for the same criterion. They They then do select a subset that they discuss and score, but there aren't these intermediate steps in between. So the specific aims page is not as crucial for this the standard review. I mean, it's important, of course it is, but it's not the standalone piece that will be evaluated like it is here in phase one. So that's a major difference. Also, you'll have people that are well outside your field on this editorial panel that'll be looking at both the aims page and the whole application if you get to phase three. So you need to make sure that it's written for that broad audience. If it's written only for a very narrow audience that you would normally see with a normal study section, it won't do well. It needs to convince, I don't know, both neuroscientists and geneticists and cell biologists, et cetera, that it's truly transformative. If you go to our website, the TRA website, and you look over on the left-hand side, partway down the bottom, there's a tab called Archive. And if you click on that, you can go and look and see who past reviewers were from previous years. So it's not going to be the same people, but you can get an idea of, maybe their appointments, their departments or something. You can get an impression of who could be reviewing, what type of person could be reviewing your applications.
All right. Another question.
Is that the whole question, Becky? I felt like
That
there
was
was
the
more
whole
to it. Okay.
question.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Are both basic science and translational research projects considered?
Yes, absolutely. And they're considered equally. The defining thing is which ones are the most transformative, right? So, yes, you can do either. I also saw something blow by in the meeting chat. Don't put your questions in the meeting chat. Please put them in the Q&A. But I saw one blow by, somebody asking about clinical trials. So that's another thing. Yes, of course, we take clinical trials. That's perfectly acceptable.
All right. Who serves on the editorial panel? Only NIH program officers, study section members, both ad hoc reviewers?
No, they are experts in a broad area of science. They're usually, PIs, extramural PIs. They are not NIH staff. No. It's similar to a regular R01 study section that way, in that they are your extramural colleagues.
All right. Is it okay to include a resource generating component, for example, new models, new reagents, as a way to further enhance and broaden the impact of an otherwise hypothesis testing project?
Oh, certainly, yes, yes. Oftentimes, that's a way to make it relatively easy for a reviewer to assess your impact. If you tell them sort of what your deliverables are and if there are resources that can be shared, that's a positive, yes.
All right. Does this program focus on general mechanisms and phenomena or specific studies?
I would say both. Again, broad scientific, basic scientific areas, maybe mechanistic, maybe paradigms, attacking a well-known paradigm is something we would love to see you do. So any of those things would be fair game. We do not have a preference for one over another at all.
Right. Will you find out which phase your application makes it to?
By the time you get your reviews, yes, you will know where you landed. People who do not progress past phase one, unfortunately, do not get a very meaningful critique. They simply get a description of the review process, which is, it's just the way it is. We have so many, we can't send them all out to topic experts. I don't know when you find out these steps, though. I don't think that you find out in between because remember, as in any other study section, the panel can reach down and rescue applications at any time. So the editorial panel can go back and say, wait a minute, what happened to that one I really liked in phase one? What did the topic experts say about it? They hated it. Well, I liked it, so let's pull it up and discuss it. So that can happen. Um, so I don't know how often that happens. Again, we don't run the scientific review. That is our colleagues at the Center for Scientific Review do that. So I'm not exactly sure when they tell you that information. Sorry. If you apply, the SRO will reach out with a lot of details and you can ask that question.
All right. Can the topic of the proposal be related to a specific disease, for instance, heart failure, or does it have to be about general biology?
Oh, it can be either, whatever makes the most sense for your project. It just must be transformative and have exceptional impact.
And along this similar vein, are both basic science and translational research projects considered?
Yes, I think we covered that question.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Sorry. Can you subaward to CROs, which I believe are like contract research organizations, in your budget?
Yes, you can as long as they are not foreign. You have to submit a detailed budget. Um, I promised to get back to the budget, so I'll mention it here. In the funding opportunity, we state that the budget for the entire initiative is $8 million per year. So that $8 million will cover the entire cohort of awards we issue new that year. We usually make somewhere between 6 to 8, maybe 9. It depends on how much they each cost, right? That limits it. So, a lot of people want to request $8 million. It better be a grant that scores a perfect 10 if you're going to request $8 million. But I'm forgetting the question now because I'm just talking about the budget. But oh, the subcontracts. But yes, you can subcontract as you need to. You're going to submit a detailed budget justification. And if your application is selected for support, we'll work very closely with the program officer to go through and make sure that that budget is really justified. We absolutely can make budget cuts if we feel they're necessary or needed.
All right. Is the investigator's stage considered, for instance, early versus mid-career during the review? And is it similar weighting as a standard R01 for review?
No, actually, we do not take what you're asking about is pretty much ESI. Um, um, if you have early stage investigator status, right? So those are individuals that have not yet received a large NIH grant, and they are within 10 years of their terminal degree or clinical training. So those individuals do not receive anything. There's no special ESI consideration for the Transformative Research Award. Instead, we have another program that is parallel to this, and the due dates are coming up sooner. It's due August 17th, and that's called the New Innovator Award. So look at our website to have more information on that. And for that, you must have ESI status. That's a single PI application. So it's quite different from a Transformative Research Award. I'm not going to compare and contrast the two, but if you have ESI status, I'll tell you that the New Innovator has a much better success rate. So you might consider that, especially if you're talking about a single PI application.
All right, but there is a question for you to compare the Transformative Research Award and the Pioneer Award.
Oh, okay. So I guess I will compare them. No, that's a really good question. People ask this all the time, and oftentimes they come to me with, an issue with their review, and I point them toward the other award. So the transformative is for either a single PI or a multi-PI award. Either is fine. The Pioneer is a single PI award, period. You could have collaborators, but you cannot have another PI, team up with you. And if you need that for your project, then the Pioneer might not be the right place for you. The Pioneer has an additional review criterion that is not here in the Transformative Research Award. The Pioneer requires that the PI be proposing something that is a clear change in research direction. That's what the Pioneer, that's why it's called Pioneer, because you're going off in a different direction. You're pioneering something new. And that gets a lot of people during review because reviewers don't buy it. They don't see it as a major change. For those individuals, considering the Transformative Research Award is a much better approach if it's not a change in your research direction. So you should consider that difference. What else? The budget for the Pioneer is fixed. It's $700K a year, period, per year for 5 years. And the Transformative Research Award has more budget flexibility. It's a longer application. You get a full, R01 style or size research strategy section and an aims page. The Pioneer does not. You have a 5-page essay, and you have no specific aims page. So there are other differences. You must have letters of reference for a Pioneer application. And for a Transformative Research Award, you can have letters of support. You cannot have letters of support for a Pioneer. Sure, there are other differences, but those are the major ones.
All right. And kind of along the same veins, can you apply for both the Pioneer and Transformative Research Award or any other funding opportunity in the same funding cycle?
Yes, you can apply for both, assuming that there is no scientific overlap between the two applications. That's not allowed at any time, right? The other thing to kind of keep in mind is not only between the Pioneer and the Transformative, there can't be overlap, but any other application you have that's still under review, that's not allowed. The other thing that's important that I was thinking of and now is fleeing out of my mind is, you're only allowed 6 PI applications per year now, right? That's per calendar year. And we're coming up in the second half, almost near the end, I guess. But keep that in mind as well, because these each will count if you do both.
All right. Can your team be composed of academic and industry scientists?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. You can have, again, multiple PIs, or you can have collaborators. The only limitation is they must be based in the US. That we cannot do foreign subcontracts.
Is technology development of particular interest for the Transformative Research Award?
Well, it can be if the technology is really transformative. If there are small tweaks, then I would say it probably wouldn't fare very well. But yes, absolutely. If you're proposing new technologies that are going to overcome challenges in the field, that could be very exciting. However, I'll tell you, reviewers really like hypotheses. So these are still NIH researchers that are thinking about this in the context of biology and human health. So if there's not an obvious link to human health, I think it probably won't fare well.
All right. Would the number of active awards of the applicant be considered for funding decisions?
So that is a new NIH priority that we have not really have run into yet. Not so far, I can say.
Okay. And there are requests to tell them what the success rate is for the TRA.
Ooh. I think the 5-year success rate, not including this year because we're not done yet, right, is around 5%, I believe, somewhere in that area. It's extremely competitive, yes. And that's over the last 5-ish years. So it has been a little bit tougher lately.
Since preliminary data are not required, what are the most effective ways applicants have successfully demonstrated that the scientific premise and their capability to execute the project without relying on traditional pilot data?
Right. Well, preliminary data are not required, but they're certainly allowed. So you could include them if you wished. That's always one way that you can ensure feasibility. The other thing is a very clear plan, right? You have a plan with alternatives, and that it's very robust. So that will help convince reviewers. I think that's the same almost anywhere. Again, you should define the risk and then talk about how you're going to mitigate that risk. And maybe some of the mitigation can be with a little bit of preliminary data, but I promise you that if you write an application that is chock full of preliminary data and it looks kind of similar to a traditional R01, that's the review that you will get from reviewers. I'm not telling you to withhold data, that's silly, but what I'm telling you is that you really want to push it. You want to be out there on the edge of something that's truly high risk and innovative. If it's very safe, you should be looking at a traditional R01.
Okay. There's a long question. I don't think it's appropriate to address the webinar, but one question is asking about overlap. Like what happens if part of your application overlaps with an existing application under review?
Mhm. Right. Well, that's not allowed, right? And you'll be asked to withdraw one of them, not part of one of them, but one of them. Um, and it kind of depends on where each are in the review cycle. But, the robots at CSR, the AI robots are very good at picking up this stuff. And then the program officers will review it and make a judgment. And if there's overlap, they cannot both be reviewed, period.
All right, I think there's some misunderstanding here. So it says, I understand that specific aims are not to be included, but I see some of the example applications include objectives. Might you clarify how to distinguish
Yeah,
this?
yeah,
And I
yeah.
understand it will be important to explain the activities to be undertaken, but not present as aims.
So the difference that you're talking about there is jargon. Okay. What we do is we advise applicants to perhaps do not use the word aims. And the reason for that is you really want to convince reviewers that this is different. This is not a traditional R01. And if you use traditional R01 jargon, you can kind of get the reviewers thinking that way. So one of the ways that it's pretty easy to do that is just don't call them specific aims. You can call them objectives or goals or projects. I've seen people call them tasks. There's all kinds of things you can call them. It doesn't mean you should have 14 of them. If you want to have 3, that's fine. No one's going to criticize that, but you're just not supposed to make it look like a traditional R01. That's the rationale for that. If you want to use the word aims, you can. It's not forbidden.
All right, you mentioned that the budget is flexible. Can you please provide more information about what that means and how granular are the budgets expected to be?
Well, the budget is granular. You do need to provide a very detailed budget justification and ask for a specific amount of money. What I mean by flexible is that we do not limit you to a certain amount or a certain range. You tell us in a very well justified way how much it would cost to do the project. So I think, that's the as clear as I can. That's what we mean by flexible. It doesn't mean that you're going to ask for, oh, I don't know, $1 million and we say, nah, you can have 2, or you can have 1, or maybe you can only have half. That's not the kind of flexibility I'm talking about. I just mean that we're not going to tell you what it is. It's not set. You're going to tell us how much it will cost to do the project.
Okay. Does this support both technology development and the subsequent clinical studies?
Sure, absolutely, yes, yes. That might be an important way to make it clear that the technology you're talking about developing has a human health goal in the end, right? That's why you're developing it. It has to fit in 5 years.
All right. How are foreign components and collaborators handled?
You cannot have a foreign subcontract. We cannot send money to another country for one of these awards, period. At the moment, foreign collaboration, we still do not have final guidance on that from NIH, so I really can't tell you because I don't know yet. My guess is that information will be coming out over the next, I don't know, months or so. I read the tea leaves or Reddit just as well as you do, but we don't know yet.
Okay. Are examples of funded applications available?
Yes, there's a few examples on our website. So again, you go to commonfund.nih.gov/TRA and under application and award guide, I forget exactly where, but you dig through down in there and there are sample applications. There's not very many, but there's a few. And they're not very new either. That's actually a huge lift for us to get those posted on the web. But for now, we do have a few there.
Are programs that are not just a narrow research project, but rather proposals for specific paradigm shifting approaches able to augment all clinical trials, for example, within scope?
I don't understand that question. Can you say it again?
So they're asking if proposals for that are like it's a proposal that is paradigm shifting because it's able to influence like all clinical trials. Are those kind of considered within scope versus having a
Oh, I
single
see.
narrow
Yeah,
focused
yeah, yeah, yeah.
project?
So something broad that could impact um, any clinical trial or how a clinical trial might be conducted, but not the clinical trial that you're running then and there. Yeah, certainly. If it's potentially transformative, absolutely, yes. Yes.
Okay, do local institutional animal and human study approvals need to be in place before the application is reviewed?
No, they don't need to be final before the application is reviewed. If you already have an IACUC or an IRB, obviously you can include it. However, if the application is chosen for support, you would want to have that ready by the just-in-time phase if you wanted to have your award issued as an open award and not restricted. Otherwise, we can issue the awards as restricted awards so that the funds go out to your institution, but you can't spend them yet in the areas that are not yet approved, right, by IRBs or IACUCs. So that's the same as any other R01, I think.
All right, so you said if the budget is 8 million, you better score a perfect 10. But if you have a large multi-PI team, that's
Mhm.
required to execute the plan with the budget size, take into consideration the number of PIs.
Well, I mean, the reviewers are not going to rank, are not going to change your score based on your budget, right? What I was talking about is if we only have $8 million for the whole program, and you're asking for $8 million, it better be the one perfect score in the cohort, or else, I won't have enough money to pay that award. That's what I was trying to communicate. Of course, if you have an MPI application and you really need every single person, it depends on what percent effort they're at. You might come in with a very large budget. I've rarely, sometimes it's not common, but I have seen review panels say that this budget is outrageous or this budget is too much money for what they're proposing. And if that's the case, then we look at it very hard and we'll clearly make cuts if the application is to be considered for funding. My point is that you might price yourself out of the market if you ask for too big of an application or too big of a budget for your application. Remember, you have to do this in 5 years. So $8 million a year for 5 years is pretty outrageous. So yeah, if you have a perfect score, you're the top scoring grant, then maybe it would work, but I doubt it.
Yeah,
You
you got to
can
think
look,
about.
yeah, the whole envelope. Yeah, you can look in the NIH reporter and you can type in, I think, the last year's funding opportunity number, and you can see who is funded and what their budgets are. I'm not going to go through that here, but it's public information. So you can look, people are always asking me what's a normal. There's not a normal amount. I'm not going to give you a number that's average. It depends on the science that you're proposing. So figure out what you're going to do, figure out the budget, and ask for the right amount of money.
All right. Does the Transformative Research Award cover vaccine research and preclinical trials?
Sure. Yeah. If it's within the NIH mission space, then yes, it's certainly invited. And if it scores really well, it can be supported.
All right. Are applications allowed from NIGMS R35 MIRA holders? And if the TRA is awarded, will the MIRA need to be relinquished?
So that is not a question I can answer. You're going to need to talk to your R35 program officer. They are the ones that get to decide if what you're talking about in the TRA proposal is overlapping with your R35. I can't make that judgment. So I unfortunately can't answer that. I don't think I've ever had a person receive a TRA that had to relinquish their R35. However, I've had people that have received a Pioneer that had to relinquish their R35. That's because of percent effort, right? The R35 doesn't it 51%, and so does the Pioneer, and you can't add up to over 100. So that's the issue with those two. But the issue with the TRA is potential overlap. So you need to talk to your NIGMS program officer, and I would do that before you apply. They will tell you.
All right, and then there's a request for you to share the success rates for all the awards in HR.
All the awards. Okay, this is off the top of my head. They are on the website in the FAQs, but for the new innovator, I think for the last 5 years, again, not counting this year, I think we're a little less than 10%, maybe 8 or 9%. Becky, you probably remember better than me.
I'm putting them in the.
Yeah. Oh, okay. She's putting them in the chat or something. Okay. Well, why don't you just read them off then?
All right. So yeah,
the
past 5 years, Pioneer is about a 4% success rate. New Innovators at about a 9%. TRA is about 5%, and the Early Independence Award is about 20%. But remember, Early Independence Award, it's a limited competition. Institutions can only submit 2 applications, so it's kind of skewed success rate because there's already some limitations coming before we even get the application.
Yeah.
All right.
And those numbers will change
yes,
as we keep adding years on.
All right, I'm coming from the NSF world where it is common to ask the program officer to give informal feedback on a one-page description of the possible proposal before submission. Is this allowed for this?
Well, I'm not going to do that for this initiative, no. So I am happy to receive your emails and have a one-on-one conversation with you over Teams and talk to you about the award and maybe try to understand from you why what you say you want to do is transformative, but I'm not going to give you scientific feedback. NSF is handled quite differently than NIH that way, and we're actually, believe it or not, forbidden to give you detailed scientific feedback. So I'm happy to talk to you about it, but I'll be honest, an elevator pitch is not needed. I'm not going to set it. I know for NSF, the program officers are the ones who run the review as well. That's completely different than what we do, right? So, um, yeah, so you can send me things, and basically what I will tell you is whether or not, in my judgment, they are within the NIH mission. I don't know that I've ever had more than a handful that were not. And that might just be the way they're communicated. So if it's within the NIH mission, it's fine to submit the area of science you need to convince reviewers that it's truly transformative.
All right. Let's see. Since the TRA allows for multi-PI applications, how do reviewers evaluate the synergy of the team?
Mm.
Yeah, and then there's a
Okay,
follow-up
so
after that.
well, let me do one at a time. So for any MPI application, you need to include an MPI management plan, right? And that should give you the space, and that's the area where you would convince reviewers that this is a team that maybe you've worked together before, maybe not. I mean, if you have, that always helps, but that's okay if you haven't. But you'll talk about how often you'll meet, who will do what do you do in the chance of a dispute, etc. There's a lot of that information already out there on the web for how to handle an MPI application. So what was the other half of that?
Yes. The other half was, where'd it go? Are multi-PI applications generally viewed more favorably for this mechanism, given the scale of transformative projects?
That's a good question. I don't think we have a preference, frankly. I'd have to go back to be sure, but in my experience, I think about half of the awards made are multi-PI and half are single PI. So it's not like it's, 10 to 1 or something. It's pretty equal. You don't always need multiple PIs or team science. It depends on what you're doing. So you tell us uh, why it's transformative and how you need this multi-PI team to get the work done.
All right. Are you able to contract out portions of your research, such as for animal studies?
Sure, you can do that again as long as it's within the US. Again, we can't send money outside the country. You might be careful then to get a letter of support from that company, not only for budgetary reasons, which you're going to want, but also, what do they do and what are their success rates, and what's their timeline? If you're, I don't know, producing transgenics or something like that, whatever it is that you're having them do, I would have it be very precise in what they would do versus what is done by you in your lab or your collaborators' labs.
Right. You mentioned that in phase 2, there are scored criteria. Are these criteria the same as those used in the regular R01 study sections?
Yes, yes, it's the simplified review format, right? But the difference is that for all of them, there's this overshadowing need to articulate the transformative potential. So yes, of course, you talk about significance, the importance of the problem, and then you talk about, that's number one, right? Number two is the approach. And so those are the first two that are scored. The third one is the investigator and the environment, and that is judged as acceptable or not. But for all of them, the significance, the approach is the result going to be transformative? Yeah.
Okay. How much preliminary data are needed?
The right amount. Now it's kind of impossible for me to say, it depends on the project. I think, as I said, I don't recall making any awards like this where there is zero preliminary data. I haven't been running this since 2007, right? Or nine or whatever it was. So I could be wrong, but I don't think that there's many that have zero. But I can't tell you that three figures is enough, but five figures is too much. I don't know. I will just tell you that if it feels to the reviewers like you have a ton of preliminary data and there's nothing risky here, um, they're going to feel like it should compete well as a traditional R01. We see that review all the time.
All right, how many applications were awarded with no preliminary data?
None that I know of, but if there's some, there's probably very few. Single digits is my guess.
Are relevant letters of support allowed for applications like the standard NIH R01?
Yes, absolutely. You're allowed to have letters of support. You do not have letters of reference, right? So there's a big difference there. Letters of support are ones that your collaborators or whomever will send you those letters, and they come in as part of your application package. You shouldn't write them for those people, but they are letters that explain how that collaborator, or if you want a CRO to do animal work or whatever, what they will do, how they will do it. If there's money involved, it should state that. But yes, you absolutely should use letters of support for that. That's one of the ways to ensure or to hopefully convince reviewers that everything's feasible.
All right. That's all that's in the Q&A box. And going through the
Great.
chat, it looks like we answered those as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Are there other questions? Please feel free to put them in the Q&A box.
There's one about ESIs, the DP5. Did you see that?
I answered it as a comment.
Oh,
I
you
didn't know
did.
if we wanted
I'm
to bring
sorry,
it
I
up
didn't see
here,
it.
but
No. Okay, good. Okay. So we do not have to keep you from your labs. If you are done asking us questions, that's fine. You can always, again, go to the website, commonfund.nih.gov/TRA. And if you go over on the left side, the application and award guide, there's a lot of information. There's frequently asked questions, etc. And then if you still have questions, you can email me at transformative_awards@mail.nih.gov. And I get back to people as long as it's, during the week, usually. Sometimes I take off some time on the weekend, but I usually get back to you the same day or the next morning or whatever. So I won't sit on it for a long time. I will meet with people if they really want to. I don't think it's usually necessary, frankly, because my answer to you will be, I'll bet you it'll be that yes, this is within the NIH mission, so it's okay for an application. But yeah.
all right. So this recording and the slides will be posted on the website probably within a week, so you can find it there. All
Okay,
right.
thanks everybody. Good luck with your applications and take care. Bye.
All right.